everything you need to fight the Trump administration. This is The Bill Press Show, live at youtube.com/The Bill Press Show.
Yep, they don't have to commit a crime anymore. Anybody who came to this country illegally for whatever reason is subject to deportation immediately. Those are the new rules of the Trump administration released yesterday. Hello, everybody. What do you say? On a Wednesday, middle of the week, here we are, The Bill Press Show, February 22nd. Good to see you today, and thanks for climbing on board the bus, the Bill Press bus, as we move out from our studio here on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., and reach out to you all across this great land of ours. Great to see you today. Lots to talk about, as always. We'll tell you what's going on. We want to hear from you and your comments on Twitter, at BP Show, at BP Show. Part of the Young Turks Network, now coming to you on YouTube, youtube.com/The Bill Press Show. Again, if you haven't already done so, please check it out, youtube.com/The Bill Press Show. Subscribe so you can become a regular part of the show, and we will send you our little updates all during the day to keep you up to date on the news of the day and the best parts of our program every day. Also looking at you, of course, on Free Speech TV with our big stories today. Yes, that new crackdown on immigration they're calling mass deportation. A wave of anti-Semitism rocking the country, and for the most part, Donald Trump doing nothing about it and saying nothing about it. Town hall protests continue to shake up members of Congress, and governors show the way. Leadership from governors on the important issues where there's no leadership from Congress. All of that coming up. Don't forget your comments on Twitter, at BP Show. But first,
this is the Full Court Press. Just a couple of other stories for you on this Wednesday morning. We begin with a new Huffington Post YouGov survey that came out yesterday. It's a pretty simple question. They asked respondents, if it were up to you, would you prefer to have Arnold Schwarzenegger as president and Donald Trump as head of Celebrity Apprentice, or Donald Trump as president and Arnold Schwarzenegger as Celebrity Apprentice? Of course, the latter being what currently exists in reality.
Right. I'm sure I know how that came down. Most people would prefer Schwarzenegger as president.
Over a third of Americans said that they would prefer Arnold Schwarzenegger as president and Donald Trump back on his TV show. To be precise, that's 35% of respondents who want the two men to switch roles. When we look down party lines, just 13% of Republicans want that switch to happen, while 63% of Democrats want that switch to happen. Have you watched The Celebrity Apprentice with Arnold?
No.
I've watched it once. It was painful.
I never watched it with Trump.
The thing is just these all has-been celebrities. You have no idea what they've been doing, and then all of a sudden they pop up on this TV show, and it's just unbearable programming.
Yeah, right.
It's terrible.
Arnold, there's only one problem. Well, two problems. Number one, Arnold was a half-assed governor of California.
Right.
And two, he wasn't born in the United States, so he can't be president.
Oh, that's right. Oh, technicality. Bummer. Right. All right. Yesterday, the National Park Service saying that they have found graffiti at 4 different memorials here in Washington, D.C. That would be the Lincoln Memorial, the Washington Monument, the World War II Memorial, and the D.C. War Memorial. As far as what the graffiti says, I saw a picture yesterday. One of them, I believe this was on the Washington Monument. It was a conspiracy theory saying that Jackie shot JFK, which I don't think how many times you roll back the Zapruder tape, I don't think you're going to get that as a possible scenario that happened. But finding these graffiti all over town, National Park does not know what exactly caused it. On a lighter note, yesterday somebody unfurled a refugees welcome banner at the pedestal of the Statue of Liberty. Of course, the United States Park Police does have to look into this to see who did it, but I think that's a pretty cool little gesture there from the protesters there. Refugees welcome.
Yeah, stay away from the national monuments, Jesus. But I love they could just put big sign, maybe give me your tired, your poor, your wretched masses yearning to be free. That's what it's all about.
On your radio, on TV, and online. This is The Bill Press Show.
Hey, can we say mass deportation? Hello, everybody. That's what's happening. That's what's going on. On a Wednesday, February 22nd, The Bill Press Show. How about it? Here we are with you, part of the Young Turks Network, and on YouTube, youtube.com/The Bill Press Show, on Free Speech TV, and on WCPT out in Chicago. Hello, 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 however you join us, wherever you join us. Great to see you today with lots to talk about. Yes, starting off with that big DHS, Department of Homeland Security, new guidelines issued yesterday to carry out Donald Trump's threat or promise, depending on how you look at it, to round up everybody. That's exactly what they're trying to do, round up everybody who came here illegally, no matter how many years ago, no matter for what purpose, no matter what they're doing today. Doesn't matter. Break up their family, leave their jobs untended, and ship them back south of the border. That's the aim of the new guidelines released yesterday. We'll tell you all about that. Also, a lot's going on with a lot of criticism about President Trump's, God, it's hard to say those two words, Donald Trump's, I prefer it that way, surprising silence and total lack of action in the face of really ugly anti-Semitic attacks all across this country. He finally did speak out yesterday. And his press secretary, I was there at the briefing yesterday, very upset that people haven't given Donald Trump more credit, and very upset that they're not satisfied with that one little statement that he made yesterday. So we'll get right into it with all the news of the day, but mostly and most importantly, we want to hear from you. Join the conversation at BP Show. Send us your comments on Twitter. So we know what you're thinking and what this all means to you. Yes, let's start with those new guidelines issued yesterday on immigration, guidelines to carry out Donald Trump's promises of mass deportation. They insist it is not mass deportation, but when you add it up, that's exactly what it is. Here's Sean Spicer reacting to that charge yesterday at our briefing.
The message from this White House and from the DHS is that those people who are in this country and pose a threat to our public safety or have committed a crime will be the first to go, and we will be aggressively making sure that occurs. That is what the priority is.
So first he's trying to say, right, okay, all we're doing is people who've committed a serious crime. Remember, during the campaign, Donald Trump promised he was going to round up and deport all 11 million people estimated who are here, undocumented people who are here illegally. So then he switched and said, after he was elected, no, we're just going to focus on those who've committed serious crimes, so defined. And that's what Sean Spicer said in that clip from yesterday again. But then he follows up, and this is the real impact of the new guidelines issued yesterday.
Everybody who is here illegally is subject to removal at any time. That is consistent with every country, not just ours. If you're in this country in an illegal manner, that obviously that there's a provision that could ensure that you be removed.
So here are the provisions in the DHS guidelines. First of all, they throw out President Obama's priorities for deportation, which were national security threat. Here's as spelled out in President Obama's executive orders: national security threats, dangerous criminals, or most recent arrivals. And remember President Obama, because at one time he deported about 450,000 people in 1 year and was called the deporter-in-chief. But then President Obama, tighten those standards a little bit, or redefine them, if you will, more narrowly focus them to be, again, national security threats, dangerous pools, dangerous criminals, and recent arrivals. In the president's words, in other words, this was President Obama, we're going to deport felons, not families. Again, all of that is out the window yesterday under these new Trump guidelines. Secondly, the new guidelines vastly expand the pool of immigrants who could be deported. Now, any of the 11 million people who are here undocumented for any reason are fair game. And that's that point that Sean Spicer did admit yesterday. Fair game. Anybody's been here, even if it's only for a year, even if it's 2 years, even if it's 10 years. And they've got families, they've got jobs, they've got kids in school, some have served in the military. No, they are all subject to deportation. The new guidelines also crack down on the unaccompanied children who cross the border, and they would also require the hiring of 15,000 new agents for ICE and Border Patrol guards. Those are the new guidelines. They jump in immediately. And by the way, on that 11 million figure, yesterday at the briefing, it was really strange. Sean Spicer kept talking about 13, 14, 15 million people who are here illegally. Immigration experts dispute that entirely, say it's probably even less than 11, because with this economy, the number of people coming into the country, and because of tighter security at the border, thanks to President Obama, the number of people coming into the country has actually diminished. It's not growing, and Sean Spicer was challenged by Glenn Thrush of the New York Times. Where does that $15 million figure come from of people who are undocumented people in this country? Sean Spicer refused to answer, wouldn't touch it at all. Again, they just throw these wild numbers out there and expect us all to believe them. The reaction was pretty swift across the country from immigration groups and from a lot of Democratic lawmakers. Here is Kamala Harris, new Senator Kamala Harris from Virginia at a meeting in Los Angeles.
Let's be clear, they're lowering the bar and suggesting that anything, even that someone may have committed a crime, might qualify for deportation. That's just extreme and outrageous.
And Congressman Tony Cardenas, also from California, but walks like a duck, quacks like a duck. You got it.
If it looks like a deportation force, it reads like a deportation force, they want to hire 15,000 new people at ICE overnight, it's a deportation force.
That's what it is, mass deportation. And you've got to say we knew this was coming because Donald Trump said it was coming. And interesting, that's the very first measure of his administration. And we've talked about this so much before. It is exaggerating the existence of a problem. Our southern border is really very much under control today with the new measures that were put in by George W. Bush and by Barack Obama. We had a policy of not tolerating mass immigration into this country, but of also recognizing the contribution that so many of these people who did come here illegally, the contributions that so many of them have made to building up this country, just like immigrants before them. We are a nation of immigrants, as we have to keep reminding ourselves, and taking both, again, under President Bush and President Obama, taking a much more humane attitude toward immigrant families. Not Donald Trump. This is all-out war on immigrant families, and no wonder immigrants across the country are really fear for whether they'll be able to stay here. And on top of that, of course, the White House announced that they're going to come up with a new executive order, a new Muslim ban, which they say will stand up and meet the constitutional test, but achieve the same goals as the first Muslim ban, which, of course, has been shot down 3 times by the courts. Senator Chuck Grassley, at his town hall meeting yesterday in Iowa, came across a young man who is a translator for the U.S. Army in Afghanistan, caught in the crossfire, if you will, on this Muslim ban, afraid that having worked for this country, saved the lives of soldiers on the battlefield in Afghanistan, now he's going to be thrown out of the country Here's that little exchange.
I am a person from a Muslim country, and I'm a Muslim. Who's going to save me here? Who is going to stand behind me and say to them that...
Yeah, good question.
And that man, by the
save me
way,
here?
Zalmay Niazi, he was injured in Afghanistan in battle. And now he's in the U.S. and he's, again, threatened.
And by the way, we've talked about this before, these translators, people who have, and others who've worked with our soldiers, supporting them on some very difficult training missions in Iraq and in Afghanistan, they are provided the opportunity and encouraged to take advantage of it to come to this country. That was before Donald Trump got in there and putting the ban on all Muslims coming into this country. So mass deportation, we'll be talking more about that and the impact with Justin Sink from Bloomberg Politics, covers the White House for Bloomberg Politics, joining us a little bit later. The other thing got a lot of attention yesterday, and this is really, really frightening. Suddenly this surge, why? We're not really sure, but this surge of anti-Semitic attacks that we've seen across the country, most recently out in St. Louis, over 100 graves desecrated in a Jewish cemetery there. You could see just like dominoes, somebody had gone down and knocked over all the tombstones. Get this, since January 1, there have been 69 bomb threats in this country at 54 different Jewish centers. There were 11 new bomb threats just this last Monday on February 20. And what has Donald Trump done about it? Not one damn thing. What has he said about it? Until yesterday, like nothing. Remember, last week, there was a young Jewish reporter called on by the president. He was looking for a friendly question. He sees this guy wearing a skull cap, and he says, oh, there's a friendly question, I guess. So the guy asked him about his anti-Semitism, and here's Donald Trump's sort of flip response.
We've seen a sharp rise in anti-Semitic incident across the United States. And I wonder, what do you say to those among the Jewish community in the States and in Israel and maybe around the world who believe and feel that your administration is playing with xenophobia and maybe racist tones?
Well, I just want to say that we are, very honored by the victory that we had, 306 electoral college votes.
Victory.
We were not supposed to crack 220. You know that, right?
So I want to clarify something. This was actually from the Netanyahu presser earlier in the week.
Okay, that was the day before.
That was an Israeli reporter. But then we have...
That's right, the Israeli reporter. Thank you. But they are confusing. And then the next day at his presser, there was a young Jewish reporter. And eventually, Donald Trump tells this guy to sit down and shut up.
Here it is.
Yeah.
There's been a report out that 48 bomb threats have been made against Jewish centers all across the country in the last couple of weeks. There are people who are committing anti-Semitic acts or threatening to...
You see, he said he was going to ask a very simple, easy question. And it's not. It's not a simple question, not a fair question. Okay, sit down. I understand the rest of your question.
Yeah, sit down and shut up. Not a fair question. At that time, 48 and some attacks on Jewish centers around the country. And Donald Trump's response is, that's not a fair question. How dare you ask me about that?
Okay, sit down. I understand the rest of your question.
Yeah. So yesterday, he tours the African American Museum, and finally, right, he deigns to say something about this wave of violence.
The anti-Semitic threats targeting our Jewish community and community centers are horrible and are painful and a very sad reminder of the work that still must be done to root out hate and prejudice and evil.
Okay, he's reading the statement, but that's it. That in and of itself, no action. And only that one statement, brushing it off the times before. The Anne Frank Center yesterday, one of the leading Jewish organizations yesterday came out and said that they called what Donald Trump said at the African American Museum a Band-Aid. and we're very angry that we haven't seen more condemnation or more action or more attention on this issue from the White House. On this wave of anti-Semitism, some people are all talk and no action. It turns out Donald Trump is neither. No talk and no action. We'll be talking more about that, too, with Justin Sink from the White House, and in the next half hour with Jack Jenkins, a senior religion reporter, at ThinkProgress. Also in the news today, wanted to salute two governors. We've talked so many times that with the Republicans in control of the House and Republicans in control of the Senate and Donald Trump in the White House, don't look for a lot of leadership on progressive issues from members of Congress or from Washington, D.C. The action on the progressive front is going to be at the governor's level. The very few Democratic governors that we have, Jerry Brown out in California, Terry McAuliffe in Virginia, and the new governor, Roy Cooper, down in North Carolina, among others. And just evidence of that yesterday. In Virginia, Governor Terry McAuliffe vetoed a bill that would have cut funding in Virginia to Planned Parenthood. Good for Governor Terry McAuliffe. And in North Carolina, those draconian voter suppression measures that were passed by the legislature down there, which were signed into law, of course, by the former governor, Pat McCrory, shot down by the courts, a federal court, because they amounted to what the court called race-based vote suppression. That was the old governor, former governor, wanted to appeal that to the United States Supreme Court. Yesterday, the new governor of North Carolina, Roy Cooper, said this is a waste of time. It's a waste of money. It is immoral. It is wrong. We are not going to pursue that any longer. And he pulled the plug on North Carolina's new voter suppression laws, said he's not going to enforce them. Good for them. Meanwhile, you know what? Let's just get this in right now. Because also at the African American Museum yesterday, and we heard earlier when Donald Trump was asked about anti-Semitism, he finally gave it. When he was asked about anti-Semitism with Benjamin Netanyahu, he talked about his 306 electoral votes, which turned out really to be only 304, by the way. The man cannot stop bragging about how big his election win was. Yesterday, and of course exaggerating the extent of it. Okay, he won. He's the president. Fine. But it was not a landslide victory. It was not a mandate. It was not the biggest electoral vote margin in history, as he alleged. Yesterday, again, at the African American Museum, total wrong place to do it. Once again, he brings everybody back to me, I won, as he recognizes the presence of Republican Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina.
I also want to thank Senator Tim Scott for joining us today. A friend of mine, a great, great senator from South Carolina. I like the state of South Carolina. I like all those states where I won by double digits, those states. But South Carolina was one, and Tim has been fantastic how he represents the people.
What is it? First of all, what does that mean? Jamie, what does that mean? Double digits. I mean, that means you win by
I have no idea.
Six figures? I don't
100, 200%, 300%, 400%.
Who knows?
I like all those states where I won by double digits.
I don't walk in Tim Scott's shoes.
He won South Carolina by, I think, 12 points, I read, something like that. But anyhow.
I don't walk in Tim Scott's shoes, but, I know he's faced a lot of criticism for supporting Donald Trump being an African-American senator, obviously a Republican. Don't you think maybe this could be a breaking point while he's bragging about his victory at the African-American History Museum?
One would think. But no, because we haven't seen much backbone on the part of Senate or House Republicans when it comes to Donald Trump.
So I want to break in with a little bit of breaking news here.
This is a Bill Press Show breaking news update.
Don't worry, it's not a Donald Trump tweet. This is good news here for the Democrats, or good news for one Democrat. Obviously, we know the DNC chair vote is coming up Saturday in Atlanta.
Yep.
An endorsement from Howard Dean former DNC chair for Pete Buttigieg. Howard Dean has endorsed Pete Buttigieg in one of the cable news shows this morning.
Pete, I just saw him on Morning Joe a little earlier. Pete Buttigieg is a great guy. He would make a great Democratic chair, I believe. But my vote goes to a person who would make an even greater Democratic chair, to Congressman Keith Ellison. That vote, of course, is this Saturday in Atlanta. But Howard Dean did a great job. It was Howard Dean who came up with this strategy of the 50-vote strategy, he called it, a 50-state strategy, that there should be a robust Democratic Party in every one of the 50 states. We should not write off any state as just being a red state and hopeless, nor take any state for granted. That was a right move on the part of Howard Dean, and now all of the candidates for DNC chair have embraced it. And it's good for Pete Buttigieg. He's made a great impression in this race, and that's a significant endorsement. I still think the chair will be either Tom Perez, former Labor Secretary, or Keith Ellison, now Congressman from Minnesota, who has said he would resign his seat in Congress and be a full-time chair. And by the way, might as well get a plug in for CNN. There is a big debate tonight.
That's right.
Among the 7 candidates, now 6 left, I think, for a Democratic Party chair. What time on CNN? Do you know tonight?
I'm going to guess it's 9 p.m. Those usually start at
Well, I can
midnight.
tell you right now.
We've got a countdown clock.
14 hours, 33 minutes, and 30 seconds away.
I think that lines up to be about 9 or 10, right?
I think that lines up to be about 9 o'clock tonight.
So I want to note one more thing. In Howard Dean's letter to DNC members endorsing Pete Buttigieg, he does mention the 50-state strategy. While some of the candidates have talked about the 50-state strategy, Howard Dean, quote, Pete is the only candidate prepared to engage the new generation on its terms and to bring them into the life of our party. So he believes he's the guy. By the way, you mentioned endorsed Keith Ellison for DNC chair. If folks want to see why, outside of what you just said here on the show, on our channel, youtube.com/The Bill Press Show, we have a video up there, full 3-minute long, full-throated endorsement of Keith Ellison from you.
All right. Okay. Check it out. Thank you, Jamie. And finally, we also want to bring you up to date on the town halls. They continue to take place across the country. We had the young man in from the Town Hall Project yesterday, townhallproject.com. A little bit later today, we'll be talking to one of the leaders of the Indivisible MOOP, which is Indivisible group, which is having such a great impact organizing people to show up at the town halls and at protests around the country. There were a few more yesterday. We mentioned the one from Senator Grassley. Marsha Blackburn down in Tennessee got an earful yesterday from a woman who actually says, instead of Obamacare, let's just have good single payer.
As a Christian, my whole philosophy in life is pull up the unfortunate. Yes. Okay? So the individual mandate, that's what it does. The healthy people pull up the sick. Yes. And I want to know why not, instead of fix what's wrong with Obamacare, make companies like Aetna that pulled out and lied to their consumers about why they pulled out and said they pulled out because Obamacare was too expensive, but they really pulled out because of a merger. Why don't we expand Medicaid and have everybody have insurance?
Expand, I believe she meant to say expand Medicare. Medicare for everybody, single payer. That's the Bernie Sanders approach. That's the only way to go as far as I'm concerned. And Mitch McConnell got an earful, too, down in Kentucky. One woman, again, talking about how the repealing Obamacare, the impact it would have on her, and she lays it into Mitch McConnell.
The last I heard, these coal jobs are not coming back, and now these people don't have the insurance they need because they're poor. And they work those coal mines, and they're sick. The veterans are sick. The veterans are broken down. They're not getting what they need. If you can answer any of that, I'll sit down and shut up like Elizabeth Warren.
Sit down and shut up like Elizabeth Warren. You know these protests are hitting home when even Donald Trump himself tweeted about them yesterday. He sent out a tweet yesterday afternoon, quote, the so-called, like that so-called judge in Seattle, the so-called angry crowds in home districts of some Republicans are actually, in numerous cases, planned out by liberal activists. Sad. You're damn right they're planned out by liberal activists. MoveOn.org, OurRevolution.com, the TownHallProject.com, and IndivisibleGuide.org. I think it's .org. You have .com down here, Jamie. But at any rate, check them all out, and they're doing a good job. So much so that Tim DeMint, remember, he was a senator from South Carolina, and then he became head of the Heritage Foundation. Heritage Foundation is like the biggest Republican conservative think tank in Washington. Has this huge building on Mass Avenue right up from Union Station. It's got a gazillion dollars, and Tim DeMint is ahead of it, and he's complaining yesterday, holding up the Indivisible Guide, that these people have so much money.
I was going through this document today, Indivisible. These folks are very well financed, very well organized. They're being bussed around to go to these different town halls to disrupt them. So it's going to be difficult for congressmen to go out and defend their positions, because these folks who are coming are not coming to contribute. They're coming to disrupt.
Oh, yeah. When they start whining, when they start complaining, you know you are hitting home. It is indivisibleguide.com.
Yep.
Yes, and what about this, again, wave of anti-Semitism in this country? So troubling. And what about Donald Trump's response to it? Jack Jenkins joins us next from ThinkProgress here on this Wednesday edition of the Bill Press Show.
I am the least anti-Semitic person that you've ever seen in your entire life. Number 2, racism. The least racist person.
For working people everywhere, this is the Bill Press Show.
So they say it's a man's world? Well, I don't see anybody's name on it. While they were out doing their thing, we slowly changed all that. We changed all that. Today, women can do anything men can do. And there's one thing we're even better at.
Don't wait. Communicate. Make your emergency plan today.
Hey, look, it's those guys.
What's up? What's happening today?
Let's do those pearly whites, man.
Yeah.
The boys, check it out.
Stand up, do my terrorists, don't compare us.
Ooh, cute.
Are you good to try?
I'm fine.
Hey girl, what's the sound? What's the name? What's good? What's up?
How many did you have?
I should be fine.
You should be.
Sir, go and step out of the vehicle for me.
Yes, sir. See ya, buddy. Today, Sean's got a hearing. We'll see how it goes. Good luck. So turns out, buzz driving and drunk driving, they're the same thing, and it costs around $10,000. So not worth it.
Live video, Bill's commentary, the best clips from the show, all in one place. YouTube.com/The Bill Press Show.
On a Wednesday, February 22nd, the Bill Press Show. Coming to you live from our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., and brought to you today by the International Union of Laborers. The Laborers Union, International Union of North America, under President Terry O'Sullivan, helping build a better America, and that's their website, LIUNA, L-I-U-N-A, buildsamerica.org. Check it out. We salute their good work. Thank them for the support of the program, longtime support of the program. And we have a little, well, first of all, we welcome to the program Jack Jenkins, senior religion reporter over at ThinkProgress. Hello, Jack. Nice to see you.
Thanks for having me.
We have to talk about all this. It's very troubling incidences of anti-Semitism we've seen so many of since the first of the year here in this country. What's that all about? But we do have a little breaking news first.
This is a Bill Press Show breaking news update.
All right, so right after we talked about Howard Dean endorsing Pete Buttigieg and how you endorsed Keith Ellison. Again, youtube.com/The Bill Press Show. Donald Trump, right on our heels, tweeting, quote, "One thing I will say about Rep. Keith Ellison in his fight to lead the DNC is that he was the one I predicted early that would win." He predicted that Keith Ellison, sorry, I should say that again, is that he was the one who predicted early that I would win. Sorry, it's the other way around.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So Keith Ellison was the one who said way back when on ABC This Week, was like 2014, 2015, saying, be careful, Donald Trump could be president.
Now, what does that mean?
Then maybe Keith Ellison wins
Trump
now?
Trying to help Keith Ellison or hurt Keith Ellison?
I guess. I don't know.
How do you read that, Jack?
I think he's just using a moment to talk about himself again. I think it is a guy who called him early, and I think Donald Trump just wanted to talk about someone who called his victory. He clearly uses every instance possible to talk about him winning the election. So.
He even, if we can, Jamie, when he is asked a question by an Israeli reporter when he was there with Prime Minister Netanyahu, he uses that opportunity again to, I ask you about anti-Semitism. You respond by talking about how many electoral votes you won. Because it seems to me a disconnect.
We've seen a sharp rise in anti-Semitic incident across the United States. And I wonder, what do you say to those among the Jewish community in the States and in Israel and maybe around the world who believe and feel that your administration is playing with xenophobia and maybe racist tones?
Well, I just want to say that we are, very honored by the victory that we had, 306 electoral college votes. We were not supposed to crack 220. You know that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it was an astounding dodge, and it was ask a very specific question about anti-Semitism, and given an opportunity to condemn it, the president dodged, and that was the first of 3 times last week that he was given that opportunity by journalists. You were talking about early, the next day at his own press conference, a Jewish journalist from an Orthodox Jewish weekly ask him specifically about the rash of bomb threats that have been made against Jewish community centers. And as you mentioned earlier, he was cut off and then told that it was a very unfair question. And Trump just said that he's the least anti-Semitic person that he've ever met and just denied to answer the question.
And introduced his daughter and dropped it there again. Here is that exchange the day after the news conference with Prime Minister Netanyahu.
There's been a report out that 48 bomb threats have been made against Jewish centers all across the country in the last couple of weeks. There are people who are committing anti-Semitic acts or threatening to.
You see, he said
he was going to ask a very simple, easy question. And it's not. It's not a simple question, not a fair question. Okay, sit down. I understand the rest of your question.
Yeah, basically, sit down and shut up. And that's when he says, I'm the least anti-Semitic person you've ever seen, boom, boom, boom. And not a fair question. Why isn't it a fair question?
Right. It seems like, I mean, what's nuts about that moment, too, is that that moment came after Trump said he was looking for a friendly reporter. And this reporter identified himself as such. It was, a conservative outlet, and like he had basically aligned himself, at least for that moment, with Trump, and yet still Trump was willing to dismiss it as an unfair question. And then later on in that same press conference, another reporter tried to double down and said, "Hey, I want to second what my colleague said. We're not talking about you, Mr. President, your anti-Semitism. We're not accusing you of that. These reporters weren't." But we are talking about this rash of hate incidences against Jewish community centers, and then Trump pivoted and said that, oh no, those are put up by my enemies, like they can't possibly be done by people who support me. And so it's a constant deflection of any sort of responsibility on his part to kind of discuss anti-Semitism and the rise of it, both during his campaign for president and since he's been elected president.
All right, so let's back up. What have we seen in terms of anti-Semitism in this country?
So, just since he's been elected, we ThinkProgress started tracking hate incidences right after November 9th. And we found the largest group that has been affected, a marginalized group that has been affected by this, have been Jewish people. We've tracked 70 instances of anti-Semitism. 70. Now, a lot of those are this rash of bomb threats. Until Monday, there were 48 bomb threats against Jewish community centers across the country in about 26 states. There was 11 more threats made on Monday. Some of those are against the same poor Jewish centers that are getting more than one call. But we're also seeing, synagogues that have had their windows smashed in and swastikas drawn on them. We've seen Jewish professors being given neo-Nazi propaganda, synagogues receiving neo-Nazi propaganda. And one of the other incidences that happened this week is a Jewish cemetery was desecrated, which is a tactic that's been happening in Europe for a little while. But we've seen this sharp rise, and that's just since Trump was elected. That's not actually including the other rise of anti-Semitism that we witnessed during his campaign, where you had Trump supporters leaving Trump rallies, telling people to go to Auschwitz. You had, Trump supporters shouting Nazi propaganda slogans during Trump rallies. Jewish reporters during that time period who wrote anything either even mildly critical of Trump and his family were hit with online harassment of, being sent death threats and horrible anti-Semitic imagery. We even got them at ThinkProgress. Some of our Jewish reporters got these, but so did the New York Times. It became this culture where anti-Semitism was, in many ways, normalized among Trump's supporters. It was something that was discussed, but Trump also refused to denounce it during that time period.
Do we have, how many states did you say were involved?
As of Monday, before this latest wave of bomb threats, it was 26 states.
26 states.
Mm-hmm.
So, and by the way, you mentioned 48, and that's the number we heard from that one reporter, until Monday. And Monday there were another whole rash of them, correct?
Last I heard was 11 of them. 11 bomb threats made, and some of these are to the same centers, but some of them are new.
These are phone calls?
Mm-hmm. These are phone bomb threats. The person or people, it's unclear who is doing this, actually made, they're using voice changers, so it's not clear who they are. It's hard to track down.
All right, so that leads. That was where I was going. Is who do we have any idea who is behind these? And they wouldn't all be happening at the same time, directed toward the same kind of targets if they were not being coordinated somewhere, right, by somebody.
They're very clearly a coordinated effort, and it's this is a scary time. We've seen an uptick in hate groups in general and hate group membership in general in the past few years, but particularly in the last year and a half, 2 years, kind of coinciding with Trump's rise. And people at the Southern Poverty Law Center have attributed at least part of that rise to his campaign, or at least the rhetoric surrounding it. But so it's not clear who they are. It's not clear, how you would stop it. It might require a very large effort, which is why a lot of Jewish groups are calling for the president. They're grateful that the president finally got around to denouncing anti-Semitism yesterday, but they would like to see some sort of plan for how the federal government or even, a coordinated effort by state governments are going to address this issue.
Yeah. So you alluded to the fact that yesterday at the African American Museum, the president finally, directly, and if I can back up for a second, there was he also missed a beat on the Holocaust proclamation.
Right.
The Holocaust, the Remembrance Day or whatever.
Right. They just they remembered the Holocaust by not mentioning Jewish people, and then defended it, doubled down on.
No. At the briefings, I can't tell you how defensive Sean Spicer was about that proclamation and how incensed they were that Jews would dare criticize him for the fact that they did not mention anything about the Jewish people.
Right. And it came. It was one of the first moments, and there was deep frustration and anxiety among different Jewish groups in that moment, and everyone thought that would be a breaking point. So watching the administration double down on that was really dispiriting, and so in some ways it was unexpected that the president decided to finally condemn anti-Semitism yesterday.
Yeah. And here he is at the African American Museum.
The anti-Semitic threats targeting our Jewish community and community centers are horrible and are painful and a very sad reminder of the work that still must be done to root out hate and prejudice and evil.
Now, after he had made those remarks, the Anne Frank Center came out and said this is nothing but a Band-Aid, right? Still, he hadn't done anything, and even that statement, which he read, came after, as you point out, 3 occasions on which he just dismissed it.
Right. He they said it was a Band-Aid on a cancer of anti-Semitism that has also infected his administration.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems to be the thing that Trump is most dismissive about, is the idea that there might be members of his administration that are anti-Semitic. But generally speaking, or at least align themselves with anti-Semites. Let's not forget. Trump was endorsed by both David Duke, a former KKK Grand Wizard, and Richard Spencer, who's I guess a rising anti-Semite neo-Nazi. He would disagree that he's a neo-Nazi, but vehemently claimed that the white nationalist, which is a distinction without difference.
And let's not forget that he has Steve Bannon by his side.
Exactly. And since Steve Bannon, says that his former publication Breitbart is, the banner of the platform for what he calls the alt-right, but for what my publication and many others note is really just a white nationalist movement that includes anti-Semitism as a component of its cultural milieu. And so, if Steve Bannon he created a publication that was the platform for this movement, anti-Semitism is part and parcel of it. So I think a lot of Jewish groups are really frustrated by Trump's response, because they're saying, okay, fine, you finally got around to denouncing this after we've had 4 waves of bomb threats and a year and a half of an uptick in anti-Semitism. Well, what does that mean? You saying that it's bad is a fine first step. Probably should have come, from their perspective a year ago. But if you're there now, what steps are you going to take? Are you going to try to make sure you root it out from within your own administration? Are you going to make sure that you're going to direct the FBI, the CIA to take more precautions to try to get rid of this sort of stuff? What is the actual plan here? And the president has not elucidated anything specifically on what they're going to do to condemn it.
Right. And there are it seems to me there are legitimate questions about what the federal government can do, particularly because we have no idea who's behind this. I'm sure they're looking into it, but it's hard to track these down. But one would also could see the difference between, for example, the new guidelines issued yesterday on immigration, right? Mm-hmm. This is going to be a priority for DHS. We're hiring 15,000 more people to round these immigrants up. It's going to be an ICE priority and the border, and then we're going to recruit local law enforcement to help us enforce this law. I mean, they were very specific yesterday about all these things they're going to do to tackle this problem of immigration. Mm-hmm. So there's some things they could do, right, to tackle the problem and the increasing incidence of anti-Semitism.
And let's not forget, I mean, his administration has already started to talk about curtailing the description or the mission of what's called the Countering Violent Extremism federal effort, and in name that program has actually been criticized previously because it disproportionately impacted Muslim Americans, but it's supposed to take also white nationalists and anti-Semites within its federal program to help root them out. And the administration has now shifted or talked about shifting that program to just focus on what they're calling radical Islamic terrorism. So they're already shifting away from concentrating on these kinds of moments and these kinds of anti-Semitic white nationalist movements. And I think one of the more telling moments yesterday was during the press conference when Sean Spicer reiterated the president's condemnation of anti-Semitism. One of the reporters said, "Okay, fine, you're condemning anti-Semitism. There has also been an uptick in anti-Muslim groups across the country, and is your administration also committing to condemning Islamophobia, or you're just addressing that issue?" And Sean Spicer replied by discussing radical Islamic terrorism, quote unquote, and not taking the moment to condemn. And I think if you're a marginalized religious group in America, I mean, I think there are genuine factual questions as to whether or not the administration is going to speak out against, hate incidents enacted against your group.
The two are really related, aren't they? I mean, one would think not, right? But they're both hate crimes, and hate campaigns directed against particular people because of their faith.
I mean, a lot of these hate groups, they are both Islamophobic and anti-Semitic and racist and homophobic. You'll find a lot of these intersections. And also, I mean, the Muslim and Jewish groups see it as a united front to try to defend themselves collectively against these groups as well. I mean, the Council on American Islamic Relations, CARE, has a reward for anybody who has information about the people making the bomb threats against Jewish community centers. They've issued, several $1,000 reward for that. The Islamic Center of North America is assisting with trying to help out the victims of the Jewish cemetery desecration. I mean, and there's a lot of Jewish-Muslim alliances that are forming right about now because they see themselves as groups that are being attacked at the same time by the same surge of hate in the United States.
I was at the briefing yesterday, and Spicer was very defensive. When challenged that Donald Trump had not said enough, or at least before yesterday hadn't said really anything. Spicer's point was, when are you ever going to be satisfied? Here he is.
It's ironic that no matter how many times he talks about this, that it's never good enough. Today, I think, was an unbelievably forceful comment by the president as far as his denunciation of the actions that are currently targeted towards Jewish community centers.
Yeah, I mean, he kept saying, how many times, what do we need to do, right, to please you people, right? He says something, and he also kept going back to that hundreds of times, Spicer says, during the campaign and during the transition, Donald Trump, every time he speaks, he says, I want to unify the country. I want to bring people together. And as far as Spicer is concerned, that ought to be enough to satisfy the people who are worried about whether or not he feels strongly about the anti-Semitism.
Right.
Yeah. I want to unify the country. Okay.
And I would challenge whether or not that's. I mean, effectively, what he said is, how many times you have to talk about it? Well, if by that you mean how many times does the president condemn anti-Semitism? Well, the forceful condemnation has happened once. So like it takes a little bit more than that to kind of combat this sort of effort. And if they need expertise in that area, I think any number of Jewish groups are welcoming any sort of attempt by the administration to solicit wisdom in this area. And it just seems like a dodge. It's deeply defensive. You know, we watched the president avoid announcing this 3 times last week. So it raises questions as to why. Why are they so defensive about this?
And one wonders the reluctance. Why the reluctance when one of his principal advisors, he may have Steve Bannon on one side, but he's got Jared Kushner on the other, prominent member of the Jewish community, and an Orthodox Jew, conservative Jew, right? You would think he'd be saying, "Hey, this is this is really troubling. This is worrisome. We got to do something. You have to do something about it."
Right. I mean, the first member of the Trump family to speak out about this was Ivanka. She tweeted out, and it is also what I think is interesting is his first response when challenged by anti-Semitism is to mention his family, which is valid insofar as he's saying I do have Jewish members of my family, but that shouldn't mean that you don't condemn anti-Semitism. It does raise the exact question you're wondering, like why wasn't there further action ahead of this? Why wasn't the members of his family speaking out earlier? Why weren't they pushing him to speak out earlier? It raises a lot of questions within the Jewish community and within his family and among the Jewish community as to why this is happening.
Yeah. Is there any geographic concentration of this? Is it like more in you said 26 states, but more in the East Coast, New York, Chicago area, or is it? I did notice one Jewish center in San Diego was included. Is there any pattern to it?
It's difficult with the bomb threats because the bomb threats seem to be made indiscriminate of geography. The bomb threats, it's unclear if the person who's making the bomb threats in the United States also called some Jewish centers in London and in Canada. So that seems to be a campaign that extends far beyond traditional borders. I mean, generally speaking, one of the things we saw in our hate mapping is that there's a general trend for if a marginalized group receives a hate incident, it usually coincides with where that population is, right? So wherever if there's so it happens in large cities, it happens in very populous states, because that's the easiest. It's easier to go do something horrible to a mosque or a synagogue if you're near one, and so that seems to be the case, but no, I think that was one of the most disturbing things about our map, though, was the realization that, wow, there is a correlation between population centers and hate incidences. It doesn't seem specific to the Northeast or the Southeast or the West. It's a general rise in hate, and it's happening across the country.
Right. Particularly starting, I've noticed since the first of the year, right, and since November 9, which is when you've been tracking it. And you can follow all of that progress and reports on that activity at ThinkProgress, of course, thinkprogress.org. Not only the good work of Jack Jenkins, but all the good team over there. We depend on them a lot, depend on you a lot for good information and the facts about what's going on. Thanks so much, Jack, for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we're going to come back and talk Indivisible.
This is the
Town
Bill
Hall.
Press Show.
You taught him how to hit a baseball.
Just like that. Say hi!
How to hit a receiver. The strike zone. The net. You taught him how to hit the upper corner. You even taught him how to hit the open man. But how much time have you spent teaching him what not to hit?
giving you everything you need to fight the Trump administration. This is The Bill Press Show, live at youtube.com/The Bill Press Show.
Yes, they don't have to commit a crime anymore. Anybody who is here without papers, anybody undocumented now is subject to immediate deportation. The new guidelines put forward yesterday by the Trump administration. Hello, everybody. Donald Trump said he was going to round 11 million people up and deport them. It looks like he wants to try to live up to that campaign promise. Good to see you today. Bad to hear that news, but good to see you today. Thank you for joining us on this Wednesday, February 22nd. It is the Bill Press Show, part of the Young Turks Network, and coming to you coast to coast on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/The Bill Press Show. Sign up if you haven't already done so. We want you to be one of our regular subscribers, a member of the team. Also looking at you on Free Speech TV and on WCPT out in Chicago. And we want to hear from you, too. Get your comments on Twitter at BP Show as we talk about the issues of the day. Tell us what you're doing about it, what you think about it. Pardon me, again, at BP Show. You've heard about all the ruckus at the town halls. Some people are complaining that these are being partly organized by good progressive organizations. You're damn right they are. And one of the best, Indivisible, Angel Padilla, is a secretary of the board of the Indivisible Guide, who joins us in studio. Angel, nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to be here.
Good luck. You guys are kicking ass, raising hell. We love it. Want to be part of that movement, part of the resistance. And we'll talk about what's going on with Angel, and again, get your comments. But first,
this is the Full Court Press.
Benson.
Just a couple of other stories for you on this Wednesday morning. We start with a new study on the most congested traffic ways in the world, and also, of course, here in America once we dial it down. So we have a top 5 major cities in the world, which we're looking at the total number of hours that the average commuter spends in congestion in each city.
Number 1, Washington, D.C.
You would think. Number one. Any more guesses on who might be number 1 in the world? What was the guess?
Los Angeles.
You are correct. Los Angeles
yeah.
is number 1 in the world. Number 2 is Moscow. Make Russia great again. Number 3 is New York. Number 4, San Francisco. And number 5, Bogota. As far as North America, it goes L.A. and New York, San Francisco, Atlanta, and Miami. And yes, number 6 on the list in North America is D.C. So, but they don't crack the top 5 in major cities across the world or in North America, obviously.
I can see why L.A. is number 1.
Yeah. And then if we're looking at particular worst corridors, New York's I-95 westbound gets the crown there at number 1. So, interesting. Bill, you and I are lucky. We have a pretty easy commute in the mornings.
Both walk to work.
Right here in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
We'll go to another poll, another study, I guess, from Politico and Morning Consult. This one just came out this morning via our friend Steve Shepard over there at Politico. And this is a topic that, of course, has been raised pretty frequently at the town halls across America. It involves Obamacare. Back in January, the same poll, Politico Morning Consult, asked respondents, do you approve or disapprove of Obamacare? Back then, only 41% of voters approved of Obamacare and 52% disapproved. We are seeing some progress here, folks. Now, the new poll released today, 45%, up from 41 approve of Obamacare and 45 disapprove. So pretty interesting here. This I would guess that the town halls are having a pretty significant effect on voters' outlook of the Affordable Care Act.
It seems that way. This is, I think, a reflection of people say, look, I may not have liked it in the beginning, but I've got it now, and it's working, and I would be up a creek without a paddle without it. That is where we'll start here on this next half hour with Angel Padilla from Indivisible Guide.
On your radio, on TV, and online. This is The Bill Press Show.
Hello, hello, hello. Here we go. Hour number 2 this Wednesday, February 22nd of the Bill Press Show. As part of the Young Turks Network, we join you on YouTube, youtube.com/The Bill Press Show. If you haven't already done so, subscribe and be a regular part of our team. We're looking at you on Free Speech TV and joining you on WCPT in Chicago. Good to have you with us. With a lot going on, President Obama, the Department of Homeland Security yesterday, releasing new guidelines on immigration. They deny that it amounts to mass deportation, but when you look at it, that looks like it to me. And many Democrats in Congress have said, if it looks like a duck and walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it is, because the new guidelines say that anybody who is here illegally, anybody undocumented, no matter how long they've been here, is subject to deportation immediately. We'll be talking about that with Justin Sink from Bloomberg, covers the White House for Bloomberg. But right now, we want to get back to the town halls that are such an exciting part of the political landscape today. And last night, yesterday rather, Donald Trump
about it.
was so incensed about what's happening at these town halls that he tweeted about it. He tweeted, "The so-called angry crowds in home districts of some Republicans are actually, in numerous cases, planned out by liberal activists. Sad." Well, damn right they're planned out by liberal activists, and one of them joins us. He's a secretary of the board of Indivisible Guide, Angel Padilla. Hello, Angel. Nice to see you.
Good to be here.
All right, so when did Indivisible start?
About 7.5 weeks ago. It was
amazing.
Yeah, a Google Doc that went online. Some former congressional staffers put it together. Basically, after the election, didn't know what to do. Felt a lot of us were angry, upset, going through stages of grief. Didn't know what we were going to do about it, and we realized that one of the things that we did know was the way that Congress works. Having seen the Tea Party back in 2009 and 2010, and the way that they sort of came out of nowhere and did a good job of stopping the Obama agenda. We thought, well, that's what we need to do now. We have to work to stop this new Trump agenda, because the people that we care about the most, vulnerable communities, people of color, immigrants, all of these people are most at risk, and we need to do something about it.
So what is your background? Were you a congressional staffer, or were you part of the Clinton campaign?
No, I was a congressional staffer. I worked for Congressman Gutierrez from 2009 to 2011.
Great guy. Love him. Love him.
Yes. I mean, his office is maybe 99% immigration. That's what they do. And so I worked there I did healthcare for his office for 2 years, and then went to grad school, which is where I met Ezra Levin, who is one of the other co-founders of Indivisible. And to be clear, there were maybe like 30 people who worked on the original document that went online. It was, again, a Google Doc that was posted online, shared it with our friends, and then it sort of took off. It started, kind of went viral. And then through that sort of initial interest, we got a ton of people who were volunteering to do things like, hey, we got an email saying, I'm a graphic designer. Can I just turn this into like a really neat, shareable?
Yeah.
Another person who's like, hey, I know how to do websites. Can I help you set up a website for this? So everything happened really, really quickly in about seven weeks.
All right. So if you haven't already done so, you've got to go to indivisibleguide.com, because it is all laid out there in great detail and extremely user friendly. As all members of the resistance, right, we're all looking for ways we can contribute, if we can actually be part of the resistance, and there are many ways in which you can do so. Again, it's all laid out for you in the Indivisible Guide, indivisibleguide.com. And President Trump tweeting about it yesterday. Jim DeMint, head of the Heritage Foundation, one of the most well-funded and one of the maybe the very first right-wing think tank in Washington, D.C., former senator from South Carolina. He was on MSNBC last night, and he said, "This isn't fair."
I was going through this document today, Indivisible. These folks are very well financed, very well organized. They're being bussed around to go to these different town halls to disrupt them. So it's going to be difficult for congressmen to go out and defend their positions because these folks who are not coming to contribute, they're coming to disrupt.
Isn't that terrible?
Yeah.
Right.
It's really interesting how the first thing that Republicans have been saying is that we're, financed, well-financed, that we got a ton of these big donors that are giving us a bunch of money. This is, the truth is 100% organic. This happened. It was literally, you can trace the progress. It was a Google Doc, people who started using it. And also, we are just like one small component of this larger wave of resistance. People are going to the town halls because they care about things like their health care, about immigrants, about their communities. It's not because they're being paid.
Yeah. No. And also, by the way, what's wrong with an organization like yours putting out information? Here are where these events are happening. Here's how you can plug in.
This is civics 101. I mean, This is an opportunity to talk to your member of Congress. They're there to represent you, and you should be able to talk to them.
So where are you directing people? Strictly town halls, or are there other things going on?
So we're in the middle of recess, so town halls are usually a big part of recess, and so we've been trying to get folks out to those town halls. It's an American tradition, right? Members of Congress, is a district work period. They're supposed to go back to their districts and talk to their constituents. So we have been nudging people to go to their town halls, giving them the resources so they can ask the right questions. But we think that there should be constant communication with their members of Congress. So they should be going down to their offices, having in-office meetings. They should be calling their office regularly, telling them how they feel about an issue. It's not just town halls. It's one of a number of tactics that we think that progressives need to use in order to influence their members of Congress.
Do they make any difference?
They do, and we've already seen it. We saw it from day one of the new Congress when Goodlatte wanted to gut the ethics office, and it wasn't because the only reason why they yanked that amendment to gut the ethics office was because members of Congress are hearing from their constituents. They were overwhelmed by the number of calls and visits, and that makes a difference. It's hearing from their constituents. Having worked on the Hill, I remember getting notices about, and even now not that I'm not on the Hill, I get notices all the time that say, if you care about an issue, call Speaker Ryan to let him know that you don't like what he's doing, or call Mitch McConnell. For us, we sort of, having worked on the Hill, we know that doesn't really work unless you happen to live in their state or their district. And so what we've been trying to get across is that everyone can influence their three members of Congress. They have two senators and a representative, and those are the people they should focus on, and those are the ones who are going to listen to them.
So particularly, members of Congress will pay attention to people who come to them from their district.
Yep. And that's what we've been seeing. We've been seeing people from their districts who are going down to the town halls, who are going down to their offices and expressing themselves, which is, it's great to see, right? We saw Senator Wyden's office. He posted a picture of a town hall a couple of days ago that had 2,000 people at a town hall. And he said that this is exactly the kinds of democracy that, the Founding Fathers wanted to see. So, this is it's great to see for just our country and for civics and democracy. But our sort of goal here is to stop the harm that we know that we're already seeing with the Trump administration. You were talking about the new Kelly memos from DHS on how everyone is deportable. Those are the kinds of things that we want to fight back against.
I wanted to play a quick clip from even Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader, has a town hall meeting yesterday down in Kentucky, and we know that Kentucky had probably the best state plan for the Affordable Care Act of any state, with the Connect, which the new governor has dismantled. But this one woman just putting it to Mitch McConnell at yesterday's town hall.
The last I heard, these coal jobs are not coming back, and now these people don't have the insurance they need because they're poor. And they work those coal mines, and they're sick. The veterans are sick. The veterans are broken down. They're not getting what they need. If you can answer any of that, I'll sit down and shut up like Elizabeth Warren.
That's great.
go. Yeah, take it right to the source.
But that's the way it's supposed to work, right? So she's a constituent of his, and she is expressing herself.
Obviously, she lives in that area. You can and talking about the coal miners and the coal mines and Mitch McConnell, Mr. Coal, right? Well, she's saying you're not taking care of your own people.
Yep, and they, Republicans are. What we've been seeing, Republicans are dodging their constituents. They're hiding. Back in 2015, there were 200 more Republican town halls than we're seeing this time around, and that's because they're afraid of their own constituents. And it's actually pretty impressive how creative some of these members get in the way they dodge their constituents.
Like, what are they doing?
They'll have like teletown halls, which are a joke. Teletown halls are ways for members of Congress to screen the callers and the questions to make sure they only get softball questions.
Yeah, and one person speaks at a time.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
They have those, or they'll have their town halls. Those that actually have their town halls will have them in the most remote part of their district to make it harder for their constituents to get to. And then a lot of them are just not having town halls at all. I've been hearing about Ken Calvert out of California, who hasn't had a town hall in years, and his constituents have been trying to track him down. He has plenty of fundraisers, and so they've been finding him at fundraisers. So he has enough time to go fundraise, but not enough to justify his votes in Congress to his own constituents.
Right. And can they go to, I think you mentioned, they can also turn up at their district offices if they don't have it.
Well, that's one of the sort of big misconceptions that people have, and one of the reasons why we put this guide up. A lot of people just sort of think that you need to come to D.C. to influence your member of Congress, but that's not the case. D.C. is not where you can really have your voice heard. It's locally. It's going down to your district office or to your regional office. It's having meetings with staff there. It's having meetings with the member of Congress. That is. That's what you should be doing. You don't have to worry about coming all the way to D.C. And that's something that we would hear before we put this guide up, is that people really thought of D.C. as a big black box and they didn't know how to get to their members of Congress. And we're just trying to make it easier for them.
Indivisibleguide.com is the place to go. What's interesting, the reaction, and Jim DeMint really expressed that, is that people were so enthusiastic, Republicans, about the Tea Party in 2009 and the people showing up at the town halls opposing the idea of creating something like Affordable Care Act. Now it's the kind of a reflection of it, right, in the mirror of, with Obamacare in place, and it's been there for 5 or 6 years now, where people are showing up at the town halls to say, hey, this is really working for me, working for my family. I mean, that's not the only issue, but that's been the focus so far, hasn't it?
Yeah, and the way that we envision this recess, this district work period that we're in the middle of, was the August 2009 recess, when we had members of Congress go down to their district offices, their districts. They had town halls, and they were completely caught off guard. They had Tea Party groups that came out and harassed them over Obamacare. That's the kind of moment we're in now, but it's the flip of it, right? And to be clear, we're in a much better situation now than we were than I think Republicans and conservatives were back in 2009. Back in 2009, Obama was a popular president. He had 60 votes in the Senate and a majority in the House, And so if you were a conservative, you were probably really scared about what you might be seeing. This time around, Donald Trump is not a popular president. He does not have a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate, and weaker majorities in the House. We are in a better situation, better place to stop that momentum than conservatives were in 2009.
How long, before I get to that, some of us on the left criticized the Tea Party as the AstroTurf, not really grassroots. And there was a lot of money poured into those by the Koch brothers, particularly, and not organizing, Americans for Prosperity, right?
Yep.
So where's the money behind Indivisible? Is this also Is it really grassroots or is it AstroTurf?
It is.
Is it George Soros?
So we have been around for about 7 weeks now. About 3 weeks ago, we put up a donate button on our website, and we've gotten a good number of private individual donations, averaging about $50 each. And that's the bulk of our funding at this point. We are looking for funding, and that's because we can't continue this without the ability to pay a few staff members from 9 to 5. Everyone that's working on this has another job, and so it's hard to keep the momentum during 9 to 5. And so we really feel the need to maybe hire a few folks to help keep the momentum going. But no, we are not. There is no. It's really interesting to hear that because we don't have like a ton of money. We haven't been funded by a bunch of groups. This is not AstroTurf at all. This is 100% organic, but yeah, it's an easy way for the right wing to discredit a movement that they don't like, and it's just not true.
Right. So the question after after Bernie lost the primary and then after Hillary lost the presidency is what's going to happen now, right? Is there going to be Bernie himself, as Senator Sanders has talked about, he's got his group, Our Revolution, and talks about it's the revolution, it's the movement, it's not just one election. And right now there is certainly, starting with the Women's March on Washington, there's a lot of energy out there. There's a lot of enthusiasm. How long does it last, and how do you kind of keep it together, and how do you sort of direct it or bottle it and take advantage of it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's great to see all of those movements out there. The Women's March, I was out there in the cold, at the rally. What we want to make sure is that all that energy is also channeled to congressional advocacy. This is a long haul kind of a thing. We're not going to win every battle, and it's not going to be over in a couple months. We really need to have folks committed to 2-4 years of work. But I think there's enough at stake where people recognize that and are willing to do that. And that's why we have 100 plus volunteers who are volunteering their time. That's why we have so many groups around the country, 7,000 groups that are associated with us. That are meeting, going down to the member's office, and who've said that they are in this.
What is that?
7,000 groups around the country in every congressional district, and they are meeting. They're meeting, and they're going down to their congressional offices, and they are going to town halls, and they are motivated by what they're seeing, the harm that they're seeing in terms of the Affordable Care Act, immigrants and refugees, environmental deregulation. All of those things are the things that motivate them. And I think because these things are so important to these people, they're in it for the long term.
And to what extent is this a program of the Democratic Party?
We hold Democratic feet to the fire just as much as we hold Republican feet to the fire. So this is not an arm of the Democratic Party at all. Part of what we say in our guide is that it is equally important to pressure Democrats. What we don't want to see are Democrats caving on some of our important issues. So just to give you an example, the ACA, Republicans have no plan. None of the proposals that they put forward would guarantee the same number of people that will get covered or the same types of benefits. Eventually, they're going to have to go to Democrats and try to negotiate a package and say, if you want to save some of these people, if you want to keep some of these people covered, then you're going to have to negotiate. What we want is Democrats not to give in on those issues. And so it's just as important for us to pressure those Democrats in some of those blue states. The example that we like to cite are, like the Schumers and the Dianne Feinsteins of the world that live in super blue states, but are often seen as really moderate, those who are more likely to negotiate on certain issues. And that's not acceptable anymore. We live in a world where you can't negotiate on things like civil rights, voting rights, LGBTQ rights, and immigrant rights. That's a real phenomenon that, and I think something that the official Democratic Party has to really be concerned about, in that that the power, in a sense, is shifting away from the major political parties to grassroots who want action
and they want action from Republicans and Democrats, and they're just not going to support anybody just because he or she happens to be a Democrat.
Exactly. And when I was on the Hill, I remember seeing the way that there was the things that leadership wanted, and then sometimes they didn't really jive with what the constituents wanted, and so the member was often forced to decide, like, I want to make sure that I'm good with leadership, but I'm working for the constituents. So what we're trying to do is make sure that they're prioritizing constituents and not leadership and not the Trump agenda.
Mm-hmm. Do you see? Is there any measured that that this movement or resistance, if we call it broadly, that is growing?
Again, 7 weeks in, we're always surprised at how it seems to keep growing, and we're very excited about it. We hope that it will continue to grow. I'm hoping that the energy in these town halls this week, and the way that we've already been able to slow down the progress on the ACA repeal, and this is movement wide. I think those things will help keep this going, and I hope that it will.
So, what are the next big? We got the town halls, right?
Yeah.
And the Women's March, we were out there too.
Yeah,
incredible event. The energy there, the spirit of it was just remarkable. What else is on the horizon? What's coming up? What are the other kind of big mobilizations that you're talking about?
I think there are a few things that we want to focus on, and also just I should have said this earlier, but our position is that if we need to stick together, so anything on the Trump agenda, if we all stick together, we are better off, right?
Mm-hmm.
So even if environmental issues aren't your primary concern, and maybe it's immigration, if you are there to support on environmental issues, then we are made stronger, right? If we stick together, we can stop this agenda. But in the short term, in the near term, I think the things that we want to focus on are there's tax day coming up in April. We're hoping to have some events before that, but one of the things that we really want groups to focus on is getting Trump's tax returns. There's so many questions about conflicts of interest, whether or not he has investments overseas, maybe in Russia. This should not be a partisan issue, right? If this is about trust in the president of the United States, whether or not the American public can trust the president, his tax returns should be made public, and we want Republicans and Democrats to be demanding it. Tax day is a clear, it's a nice symbolic day to continue to push that. Hopefully we'll get them before then.
Yeah. Is there a big march planned or a big series of protests planned?
I'm guessing not yet. Tax day back in 2009 was a big Tea Party. They rallied for Tax Day, and we're trying to replicate some of that. But no, I mean, there are concrete congressional asks that you can make. There is a Pascrell letter. Congressman Pascrell is circulating a letter that would basically use Congress's authority. Congress has the authority to get Trump's tax returns. And we're asking members of Congress to support this effort. This is about checks and balances. This is why the law exists. This is why Congress has the authority to get the president's tax returns, and they should exercise it.
And there's isn't there a march coming up on Earth Day as well?
There's a number of marches, including the ones that we just had last weekend, I think, on immigration. Which is great to see, and we've been trying to support as many of these as we can. Again, with the idea that if we support all of these issues, if we stick together, we'll be stronger.
Right. So there were the Not My President's Day protest. All the people who turned out at the airports, which was again spontaneous, organic.
Yep. No one was paid for that.
And I've heard about this Earth Day march coming up on that issue there is climate change. And there's another one but anyhow, go to indivisibleguide.com. And if people do want to help support financially, there's a button up there.
There's a donate button. Yeah, we our position remains that if you're making a choice between donating a couple dollars to us or going down to your member's office, go to your member's office. We care about that way more. Go down to your member's office. Go down to a town hall. But if you happen to have a couple bucks to spare and you want to donate, we'll take it. Again, we want to make sure that we keep this momentum going. We want to build out this organization, provide resources to the 7,000 groups on the ground, and that takes some money.
So it's power to the people. It is happening all across the country, and one of the groups that is really in the leadership, pulling everybody together, providing us the information we need to really jump in and be an active member of the resistance. Indivisible Guide, indivisibleguide.com. Angel, thanks to you and all your friends there for all the good work you're doing. I saw Ezra on one of the shows last night, so you guys are out there. No, this is great. It's really happening, and we kind of need some guides, right, as to where we focus and how we focus, and you provide. It's an incredible document, indivisibleguide.com. Check it out online, and go get them. Keep raising hell. Thank you.
Follow us on Twitter @BP Show. This is The Bill Press Show.
Hamilton was adopted from a rescue in 2008. He really likes to be around people. And as soon as I start to make my breakfast, Hamilton is right there. I get out my mat and I'm doing a downward dog and he's underneath. He's quite the pug about town. He gets invited to a lot of parties. He knows he's a pretty big deal. I mean, look at this little face. How could you not love him?
Adventure can be found anywhere, but the best place to start is in the forest.
I spy something beginning with S.
Snow?
No.
Snow-covered trees.
Nothing to do with snow.
Head outside to discover incredible animals and beautiful plants that come together to create an unforgettable adventure.
Wow.
So grab your loved ones.
Don't even.
And explore a world of possibilities.
Come on, this way.
Visit discovertheforest.org to find the closest forest or park to you.
Hey, Hard, what's this? That's my resignation letter. You're resigning? Why? Because you're constantly ignoring me. You're half as active as you used to be, and you eat stuff like this. You've been putting me under a lot of pressure lately. That's why I'm ready to quit. I forgot. I'll do better. Please, don't quit on me. Okay. But remember, it's not what you say. It's what you do.
Listen to your heart. Don't let it quit on you.
Let's go for a walk.
Uncontrolled high blood pressure could lead to a stroke, heart attack, or death. Get yours to a healthy range before it's too late.
Being prepared is a part of who you are. But it's especially important in the case of a disaster. Be informed about possible emergencies in your area. Make a plan that covers where you go in an emergency. Build a kit with the things you need to survive. There's no one more capable of planning for your situation than you. Start your plan today. Go to ready.gov/myplan.
Fancy pants peanut butter? A big screen television? You haven't even bought a sofa yet. A motorcycle? When your father finds out, he's gonna flip his shoes with 2 buckles? What do you even need 2 buckles for? Mr. Big Shot, buying whiskey shots for everybody in the bar. From the looks of it, I'd say nobody even remembers. Feed the pig.
Same great show, new great channel. Stream live video at youtube.com/The Bill Press Show.
Here we are on a Wednesday, February 2nd, The Bill Press Show. Booming out to you from our nation's capital, where we're brought to you today by the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, the good men and women of the Teamsters Union under President Jim Hoffa. We all live better because of their good work. Check out their website at teamster.org. And we're coming to you part of the Young Turks Network, looking at you on Free Speech TV, our video stream as well, youtube.com/The Bill Press Show, coast to coast, of course, and on WCPT out in Chicago, the entire Chicago, northern Illinois area. Lots going on every day, a round of activity at the White House. It's hard to keep up with it all. It keeps people like Justin Sink working overtime, White House political reporter for Bloomberg Politics. Hey, Justin.
Hey, thanks for having me. Good.
It is true. I mean, there's been so much, at least appearance of activity. Right?
Yes, it has been a lot of long nights and weekends worked, but it's always interesting over there.
All right, so the latest, yesterday, the new guidelines from DHS, it looks like Donald Trump was serious when he said, we're going to round up people who are here illegally and ship them home.
Yeah, I mean, the big takeaway from this is that the sort of de facto protections that were implemented under President Obama that really focused enforcement efforts on, violent criminals, on those who were involved in gangs, on people who have serious, criminal records. That's out the door now. And at this point, if you are in the country illegally, I think the message from the federal government is that you're at much higher risk of deportation than you were, a month and a half ago.
Yeah, at the briefing yesterday, Sean Spicer made that point, that it's not – the priority is people who've committed serious crimes,
right?
But they're not the only ones who are now subject to immediate deportation.
Everybody who is here illegally is subject to removal at any time. That is consistent with every country, not just ours. If you're in this country in an illegal manner, that obviously that there's a provision that could ensure that you be removed.
So no matter how hard they said that we're just focusing on the really bad guys, then he says something like that, and it has increased the pool of people who are eligible for deportation,
right?
Correct?
And I think there's a bit of talking past one another, right? When the White House says, "Okay, we're focused on criminals," that it makes it sound like it's the policy that Barack Obama had, where you're focused on people who are in gangs or committing crimes, murder, that sort of thing. Truthfully, if you are here as an undocumented immigrant, you are almost, in addition to having broken the immigration law, it is near impossible to hold a job, to drive from place to place, to do many of the sort of basic things that anybody does on a normal day without breaking the law. And under President Obama, there was a real emphasis to say, okay, we want to focus on the people who are violent, who are a threat. Under this new immigration order, I think that is still the focus and will be the focus of many or most people, both in the administration and on a local level. But if you're pulled over for a traffic stop and pinged as someone who's here illegally, and whether it's the federal government or the police, your local police, if they decide that they want to start a deportation action, now they've been kind of given the cover to do so under this.
And we've seen already some instances of that, like this one woman we've talked about out in Phoenix.
Right, exactly.
Who just went in to check with her
ICE regular appointment.
Appointment, and this time they kept her, and she's 2 kids here, teenage kids, and she's back in Mexico. She had not committed any crime other than having come here legally in the first place.
Well, I think she had maybe decades ago used a false Social Security number to work, and that's type of thing that we're talking about, and that's committing a crime, and therefore under these new policies, she's sent home. And so I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of those types of stories.
This order also involved hiring 15,000 new agents for ICE and for the border.
Yes, although the devil, as always, is in the details, and the question is where the money to hire those people
I was just going to ask you,
yeah.
right? How much does that cost? And Sean Spicer would not give an answer to that yesterday, just saying they're working on it now.
Yeah, nor would the administration officials who were sort of talking on background to explain the order. And so, the president obviously has a budget request that's coming up, but that's going to have to get negotiated through Congress, where Democrats have a slight bit of leverage, and I think that's a real question. I mean, huge swaths of this executive order actually have a real kind of cost element associated with it. You can step up deportation efforts, but that requires not only additional officers but additional judges to go through the sort of civil process that's related to immigration. It involves building new detention facilities because they're already crowded and have huge backlogs. It involves increasing border security in many other ways. And so, when you start adding all this stuff up, we get into the billions and billions of dollars, and that's not the sort of loose change that you find in the sofa cushions of the federal government that can sometimes help a president.
All right, 3 other quick points before we move on. One is, is this the wall? Is this the construction or the funds in here for construction of the wall?
No, so that'll be something that has to come through Congress.
Okay.
And, estimates for the cost of that, the Trump administration says $8 to $10 billion. That's something that they might be able to get through Congress. Talking to academic experts about this, we've done some great reporting for Bloomberg in our latest issue of Business Week. The cost of the wall could be $20 billion.
Right. Yeah.
And on top of that, it's a process that's going to take as long as a decade to do, because the stretches of land, particularly in Texas, that don't currently have walls are all individual ranches and farms. They're owned by golf clubs. They're owned by individuals who really don't want a border wall. And, the other kind of misconception is that, you'd build it right along the river or right up against the border. That's impossible based on the geography of Texas. So you have to set it about a mile or 2 miles back. You'd be cutting right through people's property. It's eminent domain case after eminent domain case. So it's not only the difficulty of paying for the actual construction of the wall, finding laborers to do it in Texas. The construction market there is constricted, and there's more building happening than they have. So there's construction delays related with that. But then you have to get the property from people, and that's going to be an expensive and lengthy process.
So easier said than done.
Yes.
Right. A National Guard, not part of it.
Not part of it. This is an executive order that the Associated Press reported on late last week, sort of using 100,000 National Guardsmen to help round people up. The White House shot it down immediately. It ended up being kind of an early draft that came out of DHS.
And the Dreamers, DACA.
Not explicitly mentioned here. As you've noted, we've already seen cases of people who thought that they had DACA protection be kind of swept up in increased immigration raids. But the White House really hasn't said what their plan is. We know, President Trump was asked about this press conference last week, and he said that this was a tough thing for him.
Tough thing for him.
And it is certainly a tough political issue. And we also know that, among the things that President Obama personally lobbied Donald Trump on and was thought to have some success was saying, don't go after these people. These are kids who came here. They had no choice, and they are now sort of, for all intents and purposes, woven into the fabric.
Sean Spicer was asked about it yesterday, and he just said, no, we don't do anything about DACA in this order, but it's still under consideration. I mean, he made it clear that there could be some changes on that. There was I thought, an unusual start to the news conference yesterday. The very first question to the press briefing yesterday was about Donald Trump's branding people like you and me as the enemy of the American people. Here is Sean Spicer's response.
I think the president has been very clear that certain outlets have gone out of their way to not represent his record accurately, and it is a concern to him. And I think some reporters, he has deep respect for the First Amendment, for the role of the press. I've addressed this multiple times in the past. He has a healthy respect for the press, but I think that it's a two-way street.
Now, I tried as hard as I could to get a question in yesterday. Yeah. He did not call on me, but I was surprised. I wanted to follow up on that. I was surprised that nobody else did. They let him slide with that. So what they're really saying is, if you write an article that the president doesn't like, you're the enemy of the American people.
Yeah, and I mean, my personal inclination is to sort of roll my eyes and shrug when sort of an outlandish statement like that is...
Which is probably the best response.
Right, but I do think that there is one... Well, there's 2 points I want to make.
Yeah.
One, I totally understand that people think the media is too navel-gazy about this type of stuff, and I agree that if I was given a question in that press conference or even to Sean yesterday, that there are policy issues that I think are the most important thing. That being said, I do think that there is a important policy element of this sort of argument that we're having, and we saw it surface a little bit. Both John McCain and Ben Rhodes, who was the former Deputy National Security Advisor under President Obama, mentioned this over the weekend. And Angela Merkel actually mentioned it over the weekend as she was talking at the Munich Security Conference. And that is this: when the President of the United States attacks the press in that way, we're big boys and girls, we can handle it. But it gives free license to people around the world and leaders around the world to justify their crackdowns on the media.
Mm-hmm.
And we lose the moral high ground in places like Turkey or Saudi Arabia, where we have alliances or friendships, and we try to hold ourselves up as, in China, as sort of examples of how democracy can work, how a free press can work, and how there should be respect between, the press and the executive branch and the legislative branch, and how these all can work together. And when he levels sort of broadsides like that, obviously he's riling up his base, and obviously he has things that he, legitimate criticisms, illegitimate criticisms,
right,
all those sorts of things. But that is a danger that I'm not sure they've completely thought through on this line.
No, those are very good points, excellent points. I wanted to, without belaboring it, what I wanted to ask was, look, we've all been around this place for a long time. Can't you read an article you disagree with without labeling? Yeah. It's the word enemy that is really troubling to me. I mean, because another question afterwards, a couple of us were talking, that's why I said I wanted to ask him, who else are enemies of the state or enemies of the American people? I mean, so does he equate us with ISIS? Right? I mean, or who's on that same level? And it just seems to me to be helpful. Okay, even dishonest press is smart-ass and troubling, but enemy is with the word enemy. That's a loaded word, right? And maybe if they would just back down and say, "Well, I shouldn't have gone that far." Yeah, maybe I think it would help a lot, but they won't. They just dig in their heels and say, "Of course you're the enemy because you don't give me credit." I mean, to give credit for Donald Trump, all of his accomplishments, you'd have to say that he had the biggest crowd ever at the inauguration. You'd have to say he got the biggest electoral vote margin ever in history. You'd have to say that he won the popular vote except for all the people. You'd have to that they were busing people in from Massachusetts and New Hampshire. You have to repeat all those lies.
Well, and I think it's important to keep all of this within the broader context, which is that Donald Trump, but some of his top advisors, including Steve Bannon, sort of famously have talked about how they think that an erosion and destruction of some of the traditional structures within American society needs to happen. They argue that their sort of base has been poorly served by whether it's the traditional Republican Party or the traditional Democratic Party, Washington establishment, the media, these sorts of things. And so, it's easy to sort of, I think, dismiss what happened over the weekend as, okay, Donald Trump got down to Mar-a-Lago and saw, an article he didn't like or a clip on TV that he thought was unfair and fired off this tweet, and that was it. And maybe that's what happened, but it is part of a larger pattern that I think is informative to the way that he and his top aides are approaching their job as president and what they want to accomplish in Washington.
On the positive side, one of the big steps this week is he's got a new national security advisor.
Yeah.
Who seems to be the guy that should have gotten the job in the first place. Huh?
Yeah. Lieutenant General McMaster is, he's well-liked, I think, from both sides of the aisle. John McCain, who I mentioned earlier, criticizing the president, was very supportive of this pick. and he has kind of an interesting history. He wrote this thesis that was later turned into a book about the Vietnam War, and talked really about how political leaders making military decisions can't be insulated from criticism, can't rely on a small cadre of military officials, because, as in Vietnam, those military officials will sometimes, for political reasons, back solutions or policies that they know aren't working. This is also a guy who has close ties to General Petraeus. He helped sort of create and spearhead a different approach in Iraq and Afghanistan, which is now the one that we're using more frequently, which is rather than going in and kind of turning over the keys immediately to local police, we stay there, help keep the calm while we train and build up democratic structures there.
And it's also close to General Mattis too at the Pentagon. So it looks like, and with Keith Kellogg staying on as deputy, that.
Yeah, there are some questions. He's never spent a lot of time here in Washington. He wasn't working at the Pentagon. National security is the national security sort of council and job is one where you have to sort out more than a dozen intelligence agencies plus the military, distill that information and give it to the president. It's not clear how much experience he has doing that. He's known more as a strategic planner than a strategic thinker. And so I think there will be some learning curve, but certainly I think people are on both sides of the aisle, who have been in Washington for a long time, feel more secure in him than they did in Michael Flynn.
Justin Sink is with us from Bloomberg Politics. You can follow him and his colleagues at Bloomberg.com. Justin, White House reporter for Bloomberg. So one thing that we may expect to roll out this week, the president talked about it, Sean Spicer talked about it yesterday, is a new executive order on the so-called Muslim ban, the first one having been shot down 3 times so far by the court. Spicer insisting yesterday they still think the first one was perfectly constitutional, legal, strong. They think they'll win that case, but at the same time they're coming out with Plan B.
Yeah.
What do we know how different it is, or what it might?
Well, I think from a policy perspective, it is going to be pretty similar to the first round.
Meaning same 7 countries.
Same 7 countries, similar amount of time, but they are going to work to sort of cut off the avenues that would allow a legal challenge. So green card holders under the first plan were not legally exempt. They were de facto exempt, but they were not legally exempt. I think under the new one, they will be, so that they don't have standing to challenge this in the courts. That's going to be a big one because that's what's really driven a lot of the legal challenges. There's going to be a phase-in period of some time so that you don't have scenes like we saw at the airport that led to sort of big protests and that sort of thing. So I think there's going to be tweaks that are designed to sort of head off these legal challenges. But we saw Stephen Miller last night on Fox News say at the end of the day, the policy outcome is going to be very similar to what we had seen, 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. It's sort of an admission, an indirect admission, at least on their part, that they rushed the first one out. They didn't check. They didn't have the right people take a look at it, and they were a little sloppy. Yesterday, Spicer kept repeating, as you know, we've had Department of Justice has been involved. We've checked with all these agencies, which they clearly hadn't done before, to try to come up with a document that even the ACLU said this one too could be challenged. But
I think that's the trick. I mean, we saw this sort of in reverse with President Obama's DAPA legislation, or executive order, which was expanding the DACA Dreamer program to the parents of children who had been brought to the U.S. illegally and, fulfilled certain requirements. And basically, opponents went circuit shopping. They went down to Texas and got a judge to put a stay on it and essentially kill the program, even though that again, is sort of the mirror opposite of the Trump administration. That was something that the Obama team spent, years developing and trying to get the legal language on it correct. And so there's a distinct possibility that, even they make these changes, we go straight back to the Ninth Circuit, which is a very liberal circuit, and the ACLU prevails, and this thing gets knocked down again, and we end up needing the Supreme Court to weigh in at some point.
Probably eventually it's going to go there one way or the other. On another topic that came up at his meeting with Netanyahu last week and all his own news conference that came up at our briefing yesterday, is a wave of anti-Semitic attacks here in this country. I saw one report last night. Since January 1, I think this was from CNN, there have been 69 bomb threats at 54 Jewish centers, 11 new bomb threats just this past Monday, February 20, and over 100 graves desecrated at this Jewish cemetery out in St. Louis. The president, given 3 opportunities to say something about it before yesterday, had just sort of dismissed it, bragged about his election margin. Yesterday at the African American Museum, he finally did, of all places, he did speak out.
The anti-Semitic threats targeting our Jewish community and community centers are horrible and are painful and a very sad reminder of the work that still must be done to root out hate and prejudice and evil.
And that's it. On 3 occasions, given the opportunity, didn't say anything, hasn't really done anything, but that statement, he made that statement yesterday. So does that do it for the White House?
Well, I do think that there is some indication that he's going to, that there's been a recognition that the early response to this was inadequate. And, this is a lesson, I think, to be somewhat fair to Donald Trump, that all presidents have to learn at some point, which is that when people are afraid or upset or there are things emerging in the culture, even if you don't feel like you are personally responsible, or even if you feel like the way you're handling it is the sort of best way to do it, there's a greater responsibility. So with Barack Obama, I think a great example of this was when there was a spate of sort of big ISIS-inspired or ISIS-driven terror attacks across Europe, beheading of journalists, that sort of thing. And, no drama Obama was, I'll come out, I'll make a statement, but then I'm going to go golfing, guys, or I'm going to continue with my business. And he saw a clear sort of policy reason and personal reason for saying, I'm not going to get riled up by these terrorist attacks. The problem was the American people were riled up by that terror attack, and it turned into a real drag on his presidency. His poll numbers started dipping. Mm-hmm. It was ammunition for his critics, and eventually he started to react to that. I think famously our friend Jim Acosta, asked him in a press conference, like, can't you say you're going to, kill these guys? Or, something very dramatic. And
right.
So I think this is Donald Trump's version of that, and it's
a learning curve.
It's a learning curve. I think one of the issues that hang over this, of course, is that throughout the campaign he was unwilling to immediately condemn David Duke or other people who were bringing in supporters to his campaign, and so that he comes from a sort of credibility, not gap, but this is an issue that he needs to do some work on.
Well, Donald Trump may consider you the enemy. We consider you a good friend, Justin, that does great work at the White House. Thanks so much for taking time for us today.
Thanks for having me.
Bloomberg.com, and thank you for being with us today, folks. Come on back tomorrow.
This
we'll be looking for you.
is the Bill Press Show.